So listeners are going to have no idea that this just happened, but the intro song plays on the recording. And first off, I don't think it was too loud, but it's also the first time with this song. Can you give me a review on the song?
It made me want to go listen to like a G6, which I haven't heard in like 13 years.
um, yeah, there's only so many royalty free options, so they're oh, we gotta pay someone eventually. I think is what's gonna have to happen. Gabey Lucas is on your of. By the way, I know you. Maybe your least known creative venture is as a stand up comedian, but you were also a writer for UW Dog Pound for many years.
Yeah.
Host of what was the name of the podcast? You said it to me. You have an acronym for it that I'm trying to
Oh,
remember. But
all we hear is purple.
all
That
we hear is
was
purple. Yeah.
I think that was Andrew Berg's. Um, I think I'm just kind of assume whenever we have a good title for anything that was his idea because he's like the title king.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I think that's funny that you say that. Yeah, because I've just been taking like ever since I got back from doing the Edinburgh Fringe. I've been taking the last like 6 weeks to just like let my melted brain reassemble itself. um, but
How
yeah,
was the Edinburgh Fringe for you?
it was pretty much exactly how I expected. Because it's like such a intense, insane thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I went into it knowing that and like preparing. I was proud of I didn't have one mental breakdown. So because I think what screws people over, especially like people who I think there's some Americans who have like some TV credits who think that matters for anything, and
Sure.
then they go there and think they're gonna like get fleabagged and become like a star, and then when they're doing shows to like 6 people, it breaks their brain. and so I think if you go there expecting to like um whatever, I don't know, expecting to become some overnight success, then you're
Yeah.
gonna die.
So Edinburgh Fringe Festival for the folks that are here for sports and comedy is like a arts festival in Edinburgh, Scotland that is like very famous among comedians. I think it's like I think every time I hear about it, there's actually a great God, what is it called? It's a Hannibal Buress documentary about Edinburgh and struggling
Mhm.
there. But like, it has taken like comedians. I think Michael Che left it like halfway through.
Oh yeah.
It's a slog, is my understanding, and you don't make money unless you've made the accommodations cheap enough by like putting enough people into a home.
Yeah, which
Uh,
is like not possible anymore. It's like insane. But it's so to but the scale of it, it's the largest performing arts festival in the world, and it's the third largest ticketed event in the world after the World Cup and the Olympics.
Damn.
So yeah, there's like there was I think 3,900 shows there this year.
Oh shit. Yeah.
Um, and like a lot of that is stand up, but a lot of it is everything else that you could ever think of, and a
Yeah,
lot
I've
of
thought about
yeah.
doing. There's a couple fringe festivals in the U.S., and I don't know that my act
There's a
is
lot of
like.
fringe festivals in the U.S.
Yeah,
Like there's loads everywhere in the world.
the Utah one in particular is like 7 days. It's like I think reasonably cheap to travel there
Hmm.
during that time, and then you just get like 7 days of running an hour, and that's like that would be nice. That's the one that I've had
Hmm.
like my eye on. Seattle Fringe wouldn't be as exciting for me, and I don't think there is a Seattle Fringe festival, right? But I
Yeah,
don't think it's as
I don't know
stand up
too much
focused. Where I
about it.
think Utah's got a little more stand up.
Yeah, the U.S. American fringes tend to not have that, and
Well, it's
it's
because I mean
just
we have stand up everywhere, so it's like you don't even
well,
really
they have
need.
stand up everywhere in the UK too. It's just that the history of how their comedy developed is also intertwined with fringes. So there's stand up everywhere in the world. Like my favorite city to do stand up in, or my favorite city I've ever done stand up in is Bristol in England. Uh, but it's just a different ecosystem and different infrastructure. Um,
How much of
but
that is
yeah.
like I'm sure the crowds are good, but doesn't it? It's got to feel cool to be like my favorite city is a city you'll never even go to, probably.
I do whenever someone's I got like whenever somebody it's like whenever some like man who's like very new at stand up meets me and thinks that I'm like he hasn't seen me because he's new and I'm
Sure.
not like out every night like I used to be. And so and he thinks like, oh, she's new, I'm gonna use this as a time, as an opportunity to sound like I know what I'm doing and talk down to somebody, and go, I sometimes will, like, once once it's clearly established that they've just, like, been doing open mics for 6 months, um, I'll, like, kinda slide that in there just to get them to shut up. It never works, but at least I'm like,
Sure.
"You know what? You need to be knocked down a peg, like, I don't think I'm hot shit, but you do and need to stop." Um, yeah.
Yeah, the delusion of a stand-up comedian cannot be deterred by being like one-upped on cool shows that you've done, or seven-upped, I guess it would be. Like that's many times cooler than a like Everett open mic, for example. Well, I'm glad it went well. That's I saw it was you and Timmy Booth staying
And
together. Is that
Andrew
right?
Frank,
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
they were with us too, um, yeah, yeah.
What do you estimate the like? How much did you spend to be at? Not loss. I'm just saying, like, what is the cost to do it? Whether it's like theater rentals, the obviously housing, etc.
So like, I self-produced. I didn't hire PR. I didn't hire a producer. I didn't get I wasn't able to. I went with one of the big four venues, and people will be. I have some British friends who will be like, "Why'd you go with the big four instead of like one of the free venues?" And the assumption is like that it's because I'm hoity-toity or whatever. Because like in there, a lot of the Brits are more likely, or when they're like my peers, like when they aren't, whatever, when they don't have agents, are more like, will often try to get in with like free stuff, and there's like two huge free organizations, and I'm like, yeah, because I didn't like get an offer. Like it's very
Yeah,
ironic to like get an offer from one of the more historically prestigious venues, and not the one that I could have saved a lot of money on, but like wouldn't
sure.
have been. So yeah, the my venue, I was yeah, I did my hour every day for 25 times. 25 times. I took 2 days off. And so housing, without all of my, because I cut a lot of costs from promo and all that. I think I ended up spending around, between plane tickets, venue, train, because I flew into London and then trained up. Housing, did I say that already? I don't know. I did some outdoor poster shit. I think it was like 4,600 pounds.
What does that translate? Don't act like you're British to me, Gaby. This is what does that equate
No,
to in dollars?
it
What in
was, that's the
dollars?
issues. It's all like, or maybe it was like $4,600, and
If you call it
and
quid,
then
I'm fucking shutting the
I'm
podcast
not
off.
calling. I've never called it. 'Cause I don't want to. Yeah, I mean, my housing was like,
So that says it's
well,
Google
that's
says
like
it's like
12.
$5,900 US. Does
I
that
think I
seem
spent like $5,500. Yeah.
okay? So
I don't
that's actually when you started with when you started with like the syllable four, and then you interjected some commentary in between. I wasn't sure if it was going to be 4 or 14, so that's not as bad as I thought.
know. Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, I was like going cheap. Like
sure.
people, um, yeah.
All right. Well, that's yeah. It's all the running it 28 days in a row, or 28 out of, or would you say 25 out
I
of
think it
27
was,
days,
my
something like
first one
that?
was July 31st, and my last one was August 26th.
Yeah.
And then I had the Monday the 12th and Monday the 19th off.
Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
amazing. I'm jealous, and I am jealous. I am 40 or $5,900 richer than you potentially, but the
Yeah, I get my payout like tomorrow or the next day
oh
from
shit, you
the.
still haven't gotten your payout even?
No, that's, so it takes like, because
Oh
there's
wow.
like 4,000, yeah, there's like 4,000 shows. So like there's like all these ticketing goes through like the Fringe Society, and through your own venue, and through like whatever other shit.
I would
And
have
so
assumed
like,
it's just like Eventbrite. I'm not gonna lie to you, like that's I
oh
didn't.
no, no, the like the Fringe app is like a big part of it. I bet
Oh
the
nice.
people who logged on to watch slash listen this for sports are really
This could all be
excited right
edited
now.
out. We're not live streaming this one, so you're fine.
Thank
It could
Christ.
all be.
Um, yeah,
there's
it takes them
chats
a
that
while
just
to
like
like organize
get
it,
this.
and then the Fringe Society, everything that's booked through their app or online or whatever, they have to organize and get the payouts to the venues, who then organize all their stuff, who get the payouts to me. So my venue, like might be one venue that's just like a venue that has 8 shows or whatever there, but my venue. And this was like a down year for them as far as their capacity because their main hub was under construction. So they had essentially they had the building that I was in, and they technically had the National Museum of Scotland too, but those were like for 2 venues that were giant. And I think they had like 8 venues in my area, and each of those had what, 8, 9 10 shows
So
maybe
does everyone
a
get
day.
paid out today, or is it like they stagger it out? They're like paying off. Some
Different
people get
venue,
paid the
it
day after.
depends. Like
Gotcha.
some people got paid a month ago. Some people still haven't heard. One
Did you
venue,
break even? Do you know?
no, nobody breaks even
All right, that's what I
unless
thought.
you're
That's
like
what I was.
Rose Matafeo,
Yeah, I don't even know
who
who that is.
complimented my sweatshirt, by
That
the
is
way.
crazy, by the way. How like comedy sometimes there's like a segment of comedy that's someone who sells tickets, just like essentially a similar culture, a little ways away. That I have no idea who they are. Even in the U.S., there's people who sell out theaters that you're like, I've never heard of that person
Yeah.
before today.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah. To your point, we should probably break away from the Edinburgh Fringe talk and talk about why you're here, because you were a writer. You wrote about the Washington Huskies, specifically the football team. From what I saw, I don't know if you branched out of that. If you
Yeah, I did
branched,
softball as well, but
okay,
not basketball. I'd never known anything about basketball.
got
I'll
you.
be like,
So,
go team, and that's kind of
but
it.
for years you wrote about the Huskies, and then that we'll spoil the end of this a little bit. You've kind of like become disenchanted with the team, but can you start by
No,
talking
not
about
with the
like,
team.
or
With
with the institution of college football, I guess, which
sure.
does include the team for the record. But the can you talk to me about like the beginning of becoming a Huskies fan?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I was born into it. Like
Sure.
my parents met there, and my dad's parents met there. So like I have 2 generations worth of being like of UW being responsible for me existing. So if nothing else, it's like a life debt.
Sure.
um but yeah, I don't know, I think my first game I was probably like 3. My like there's a story in my family of just like when they would this was before you would like put earmuffs on toddlers or babies when they went to sporting events. So like my dad brought me, and like when they scored, I would just be like noisy, noisy. um
I
uh
took my daughter to Sue Bird's last game, and I had.
oh wait, I was there too.
Oh yeah. Well, there was a lot of other people there, so I'm not
Yeah,
surprised we
yeah,
didn't run into each
yeah.
other. But it's like sold out Climate Pledge Arena, and it was she was probably actually about 3 years old. It was right. I think it was right after her 3rd birthday. She's 5 now. Does that timeline
Mhm.
work out?
That's
Um.
crazy to me, by the way, because I remember when you were like, my wife's pregnant.
Oh, I know, I know. Well, I mean, so much has happened. Like, I probably haven't actually done like a show with you. Well, no, we did a post-pandemic show, but probably
Yeah, like
before.
once.
Yeah, with Ron on Hirschberg. But other than that, I don't think I've like barely seen you
Oh
since the
yeah,
pandemic, and
yeah.
it was 5 years ago almost now. Uh, yeah. Anyway, so it was like the day after her 3rd birthday was I think Sue Bird's last game, and so we went, and we actually had to go because she's very good at voicing her opinion. We went to like they have like a what are they, like a sensory kit for, it's mainly
Yeah.
for like autistic people, but she like she's got like very sensitive ears because she's young, and so we got her some headphones or earmuffs to
Mhm.
cover it up. Just to be, we missed the whole first half of the game because she like I could not get her to go in. We'd like walk part way in, and it was never quiet enough because it was like rocking. It was
Yeah.
never quiet enough for her to not. And then we would when I finally got her in, we'd be sitting at the seat, and she'd go, "I don't like these," and I'd go, "Okay, you could take them off." She'd take them off and then just put them right back on
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Smart that we have those now, though.
yeah, for sure.
Like, took a while.
So you first game at 3, and then you just like follow the team. How do you end up getting to where you're writing about the
Uh,
Huskies?
well, yeah. I mean, I like anyone who knows me, who knew me growing up, like knows that is that wine?
No, it's cold brew coffee.
Okay, that really looked like wine at 1 in the afternoon.
Sometimes I'll be on and it's like it looks like a stout, like I'm drinking a
Yeah.
stout at yeah.
That's what it would look like, except there was a little red glint, purple glint. Anyways, yeah, no, anyone who knew me growing up knows that I was, yeah, speaking of neurodivergent, like obsessively focused on football. Like
Sure.
and I think part of it is that like I couldn't play because I'm a girl. Like, yeah, sure, technically you could, but I had played like t-ball and coach pitch baseball with boys, and I knew that that's a miserable experience. Because like, you know, I was 5 or 6 years old the first time I realized like, oh, boys are bad to us. Like they're not good. They don't treat us well, and I don't want to. So I wanted nothing more than anything to play football and couldn't. And so there was like no outlet for that. Um, and you know, and the closest thing there was just becoming very obsessively focused on whatever teams we did have.
Sure.
So obviously like the Seahawks as well. There's also like a picture lying around somewhere at my parents of me when I was like 4 or 5 years old in like a fake Seahawks helmet sleeping while cuddling. I'm like in that while cuddling my like stuffed cat toy. But yeah, so I think in the absence of having any opportunity to do that, it was a lot of just, I don't want to say studying because you're like 9 years old, you know, but paying, I think, attention to more of the minutia than a normal 9-year-old will, or even a normal adult, probably. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I'll say about the studying thing. I had one of the worst teachers I ever had made a great point to my mom. I'll give her credit for that. She, we would go to the library in class, and I would pick up like Sports Illustrated from the library instead of books or
same. Yeah, I would pick
whatever
up, like, DK
yeah, and she was like, my mom was like, I know, but I wish you would read books. And she was like, no, it's reading is reading. Like, it's not like the vocabulary in Sports Illustrated is dumbed down because it's for sports fans. Like, reading is reading, and this magazine has like it's not classic literature, but like so studying. I mean, if it's not studying, then I got to talk to a neurologist because I've spent a lot of time looking at like baseball analytics that I've had to chalk up to studying for my wife to not be mad at me that I spent that much time talking about it to her.
Yeah, it's academic, babe.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, it's all that, and then I think like I always like both of those teams, but I think UW, because it's more of an organic thing, like community thing, I think I always felt closer to, as much as I like cried when I was however old I was, 11 or whatever, when the Seahawks lost to Pittsburgh in the Super Bowl. Like, you know, I always loved them, but like UW felt like it was more integral to like the community. And especially like mine, especially because like, you know, every week, every Thanksgiving week before, you know, at school, in elementary school, like we had all of our little Apple Cup rivalry stuff, and you know, my aunt and one of my grandmas was a Coug, so like there's all that whole thing that felt more, I don't know, real.
Yeah, and so this sounds like a little bit of a foreshadow to why you've fallen out of love with the institution.
Can you see where it's going?
Yeah. So then, tell me if my memory's right, because you went to school in Vancouver, BC, which is not like a necessarily a hub of American sports journalism necessarily. But you know, I think like to a degree, and I wrote for a variety of websites, even like the era that you and I do comedy in. I don't think I could have survived in another era, like a non-internet era. I could not have done comedy. I could not have written, like I never would have put in the time to be like on a typewriter, I never would have sent VHSs out to a comedy club. Like the fact that we can do everything on a computer and on the internet and send it out makes it so like it doesn't matter if you're in Vancouver or if you're in Woodinville or if you're in fucking Edinburgh. You could easily write about, college football. You could easily do a podcast. You could easily be sending out avails in all these places. And eventually you end up writing though for UW Dog Pound. Did you write anywhere else, or is that like the first and last?
I, as far as like sports stuff, yeah. I mean, technically, I did stuff for the SB Nation Pac-12 site first, and it
Sure.
literally was because they were like so under, like they were just so and they were so understaffed, and we're like, we'll take anybody. And it was the end of the 2015 season. Really, what happened is it was the end of the 2015 season. I was like watching I was watching the Utah game, and it was like the week before Utah was going to play UW, and I mentioned that Travis Wilson, with how his footwork and mechanics were like how because he had kind of funky mechanics, and he was so lanky. He was like 6'7", and so that's like a lot of degrees of where things can get messed up, versus if you're like a Russell Wilson type. And so I just like mentioned offhand to my dad that I was like, yeah, if UW's, like if UW's pass rush can like make him even a little bit uncomfortable, then like we'll get multiple picks off of this guy. And I don't really remember what happened in the next game. I'm sure Utah won because that was like the 6-6, like, oh, we're about to be good, but we're not there yet season.
Sure.
But then my dad was like, have you ever considered writing about this? And I was like, I don't know. And then I just hit up that Pac-12 people, and then UW DP, who at the time Chris Landon and Ryan Priest were the managing editors. And after like a month of writing for them, like those two just hit me up and were like, want to join us instead? And I'm like, okay. But to be clear, also, I wanted to be very clear, like, because you referenced sports journalism. At no point have I been a journalist. Like I've never been in the press box. I'm not in that world. I'm not a beat writer.
Are you trying to preserve the reputation of journalists or yourself right now?
Oh, journalists. Like I'm not. I also, this is something I've always been uncomfortable in any way presenting myself in association with anything that I'm not like completely am. I don't know why. I probably maybe a therapist could figure that out. But
when you started
yeah,
doing
I'm
comedy,
like
how long did it take for you
analyze
to
stuff.
tell
I write
anyone?
about it. What's up?
When you started doing comedy, how long did it take you to tell people you were doing comedy?
Or I think I like
maybe phrased differently. How long until you started calling yourself a comedian?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I know because I was working on like in TV. I started when I was in college, and I was working in TV, just like in the production department during the summers at the time. And I do remember mentioning, because it was kind of like I had been doing it for like 6 months, but like you're in college, so it's like, and especially then it wasn't even twice a week.
Right.
I didn't even really know that much about like what was going on in the scene out off campus until that I came back after that summer. But I remember somehow it got out to like our first AD that I had like dabbled. And I don't remember what he said, but he like brought it up at one point. I'm like, yeah, I think, yeah. But I remember feeling very uncomfortable, like writing. I think I wrote that down, like maybe not on my resume, but on, I don't know, I'd mentioned it as like, I've kind of done this. I don't know. And I remember feeling very uncomfortable because of that. Like, don't be a self-absorbed brat. And mostly it's like,
Yeah.
like it's so transparent. Like if somebody is like, I'm a comedian, and they've done like 5 mics, like it's so easy to immediately see through that, and then that's just embarrassing. I think that's what it is. It's embarrassing to present yourself as something that you're not.
Yeah, I've talked to my wife about this a little bit. The one that's like a try hard. That person's like a try hard.
Yeah.
What I have discovered is, good or bad, effort is unattractive. Like, you want to see a person who looks like Robinson Cano fielding a ground ball, not a person who's fielding it with 2 hands and like fundamental, right? Like, effort looks embarrassing. And so I remember when I was probably 6-ish months in, and I interviewed Sam Morrill years ago on a podcast that I had at the time. And I remember emailing him, and I was like trying to describe my experience doing comedy. And I think I said it almost exactly like you described it, is I've dabbled in comedy on occasion, which is like, if I would have just said I'm a new comic, that would have been fine. Like if I was
Yeah.
getting that email now, I'd rather have someone say I'm a new comic than this like dancing around it. But yeah, I fully get what you're saying. Is like,
Yeah.
one, it sucks to commit to something that you're not good at yet. Also, to be like I am this, and you're like, oh, but I suck at it, so that means I suck. Then if I am this thing that I suck at, then I suck. It turns out.
I think you're onto something, but I don't think it's. I mean, it is embarrassing to suck at something, but I don't think it's that makes it feel bad. It's like you're kind of halfway. You haven't proved that you actually are that thing yet,
Sure.
right? Like I you know, like I could take a painting class and occasionally paint whatever, but I wouldn't be like I'm a painter. Like, and
Sure.
it's not about I suck. It's about I'm not a painter.
Yeah.
I kind of, you know.
Well, I think another thing about comedy in particular for me, and I don't know if you'll identify with this, but I loved it so much before I started doing it that I was like, I don't want to insult comedy by saying what I'm like, I am part of this. Do you know what I mean? Like until I'm good at it, I don't want to like tarnish the name of comedy for
That's
like that's like
interesting.
I didn't want to like I never want to overpromise on stuff, and so like you know when people book a show and it's like a terrible show and
Oh,
they make a bar or a restaurant or whatever the venue is, like the people that own that restaurant now hate comedy, like hate
mm-hmm.
capital C comedy. They will never consume comedy, they will never book comedy. Like comedy is over for like they've killed the fanhood of two potential comedy fans because they put a and I didn't want to do that for comedy because I cared about comedy before I started doing it.
Yeah.
Now I'm an egomaniac and I'll tell everyone that I do comedy. But
I occasionally, can I add also, occasionally I'll see a guy on like Hinge who's maybe done like uh who's obviously not a comic, but they've like
sure.
done an open mic or two, and then they have a picture of that on their thing, and I so badly want to, even though it's the least attractive. By the way, that's another thing, boys. If you've done a couple open mics, the least attractive thing you can do is like present yourself that way. And so I so badly want to like that, just to be like, hey man, I'm gonna give you some advice. Take that down.
I'd be interested in finding out if that is because from your perspective, I'm sure that's tainted by the fact that you are a comic and
Oh, sure.
their like status.
Yeah.
But most people who are on Hinge, most
Yeah.
people in the world are not aware of like their local comedy scene.
Right.
And I wonder if it's actually more successful than you would give it credit for.
Probably.
Yeah.
But it's still.
But not if you're going to date another comedian who
Yeah.
knows that you're a two-time
You're
open
not
micer.
a
Yeah.
comedian. Yeah. I think that you're totally. I'm sure you're right. I'm sure you're right. But it is definitely something I'm like, take that down, you fucking poser.
Yeah. Well, that's the way I feel whenever I
to-
see
you-
when
yeah.
you see someone like post a 7-minute clip of them bombing at an open mic on their 5th open mic. You're like, this is like you're eventually going to have to decide if you want this to like get constant validation from social media or if you want to like be a good comic.
Yeah.
And either one's fine. I don't care. I mean, like do the less competition, the better. Like do the thing where you burn out because you keep posting the same 7 minutes and people stop enjoying it. You know what I mean? Like that's fine. I don't
You
care.
say stop enjoying it as if people ever enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, they'll pretend at a point.
Yeah.
When do you has your family ever seen you do stand up?
Oh, no. So
Ooh.
this actually ties in with why I was like, when you were saying that, is because that's the other thing I don't understand is people who are like eating shit at their 5th open mic and then post it online, and I'm like, do you want that? And that's how I know that I'm like, your brain is so in another infinity universe than mine, is because the idea of like someone seeing me, someone who I know and love and whose like opinion about me I like kind of care about, seeing me in my, and in it just not even bomb, but just like
Yeah.
is terrible. And I think the thing is, I don't really care that much about that itself. What I do care about is that and this I'm gonna circle this back to one thing from Edinburgh at the end. people who don't do stand up or who don't do like comedy stuff, any like performance stuff, whatever, and who also don't like frequent different shows and not just like shows at some random like club, but like indie stuff and who are curious about this, about, you know, actual events and whatever's going on. They so don't understand. And I've had conversations with people where I've like tried to explain this to them and they're like, no, I don't think so. About how all the factors that go into making someone do well versus not, making a show good versus not. Like they don't get that, like, yeah, the lights are on, the ceilings are high, the layout of the space is awkward, the sight lines are kind of maybe weird. And also the person hosting, who is also the producer, who's also been doing this for like a year at name of independent bar venue redacted only. So they don't know what they're doing, and like they just created the shit show, and it's like, and they don't, the audience members who don't know what they're seeing don't realize that the reason why they're seeing like all these comedians who are award-winning eat shit isn't because they're bad comics. It's because this is an environment where, like, you know, whatever details are involved, everybody was doomed.
Yeah.
And, you know, obviously that's like the extreme version of that, but that's part of it. Is I just so my mom and dad were going to actually come to Edinburgh and see me for the first time.
Oh shit.
The reason I allowed them to do that is because they understood that how Edinburgh worked, and they understood they were probably going to see me do a show to like 9 people. And my slot was at 2:20 p.m., which for Edinburgh isn't like crazy early, because shows run all day, but still early. Still, you have to get like some energy up. They understood that, like, you know, I might go see my kid have a rough day, but who cares? Like, who I'm like, I know that you know that is just what this is.
Yeah.
But it's hard to explain that, especially if you're going to you say if I'm doing a show and I haven't done it before, or maybe I'm not as familiar with the producer or whatever. Like, I don't know that you're gonna be putting everyone in a position to have people come away and be like, yeah, that looked good. That being said, my parents didn't come and see me in Edinburgh because my mom, she's fine, but she had like a little medical thingamajig that meant she couldn't fly. Although the first
blessing in disguise.
Yeah, I did my aunt and uncle and what's it, first cousin once removed? I don't know. Their cousin who I grew up with, my mom's cousin and her husband, who I'll just call aunt and uncle because close enough. They did come and see one of my previews for my show on San Juan Island, which was me and Rachel Afjay, which was very fun because my show has a very long running or significant running thread about the pig war, which is like on San Juan Island, you know. And so the place, the people I was working with and the venue I was working with were freaking awesome. And the people on San Juan Island were really excited to like come see it. So we had this really great audience. Everything was great. Also, Rachel opened and she kicks ass. And like, you know, so everyone was in a really good mood. It was a fantastic time. So that was in the first time in what, 8 years, 8-9 years, I guess, if you count my first like year of stand-up, which I kind of do, kind of don't, that like my aunt and uncle or anyone had seen me.
My wife, we started when I started stand-up, it was like 6 months, no, not even that, like 4 months before we got married. And so we were dating, but like engaged. And then she saw me, we had been married for 2 months and went to a wedding in Bellingham, and I looked up if there were open mics in Bellingham, and she was not happy that we were, once we got done with this wedding, I was like, there's this open mic at like 10 p.m. at this place in Bellingham, and she's like, what the fuck? Why would you say? And I'm like, I know, I can cancel. And she's like, you don't have to cancel. And then she came, and I ate so much shit. Like, it's just comics. Nobody's paying attention. I'm there, and they don't know who I am. Like, that, you know, it's not exciting to them that a 6-month open micer can't. Now, if I went to Bellingham, there'd be like, you know, some comics that I know.
Yeah.
I'd be like, it'd be a paid show. This is like, they don't care about me at all. They, for all intents and purposes, for them, this could be my first time doing stand up. The next week,
Why
What?
would you do that to
Because
yourself? Go
because
enjoy
I'm
it.
stupid. I did wait 6 months in my defense, and then but I also the next week I was doing an open mic that was like well attended, and so I had my wife, my mom, some friends. Like it's the first time I ever invited people to come, and
Why
I
would you?
fucking killed. And
It's
I
still not worth it. The risk reward.
Oh
the
no, I mean eventually they were going to see it. Like part of the deal is, especially like with my wife in particular, but I think in a marriage period, she's going to have to be part of it to some degree because I'm like leaving my house 3 times a week
Sure.
so she's going to have to have like an occasional involvement. And before we had kids, she came to a lot of shows. So and by the way, she's seen me eat shit and like we've talked about it after, and it's not always great. Like it's not always as supportive as I would want it to be or as empathetic as I would want it to be. Sometimes she thinks that she knows better than I do, and sometimes she's wrong, and sometimes she's right. But anyway, we should get back to so you go through all this time as a Washington Huskies fan and writing about the Huskies and through a tumultuous period. I mean, I clock in as a Huskies fan in the Lambright era. I suspect you're probably like Neuheisel or that's probably what like not that I know you were like at games before that, but your earliest Huskies memories Neuheisel, Willingham, Gilbertson, like
Uh, yeah, I would say Lambright, like, is probably, you're right, is probably too, like, I was at those games, but I was too young to,
right.
like, really clock anything. Probably Neuheisel was the first time that I was, like, had complete thoughts about it.
Sure. So the Neuheisel era kind of the end of the Neuheisel era ushers in just like a tumultuous couple decades essentially for Washington Huskies football compared to like obviously I mean they had some like under Don James there were some issues with the NCAA, but like stability coaching, it was a guy that was like never going to leave for another job, and then they go through you as a fan, you go like I'll say this, you go through all the shit. You went through all the shit. You went through Neuheisel, you go through I mean, you gotta give Gilbertson a fair amount of credit. You go through Willingham, you go through the Sark. I mean, then obviously like good years with Peterson, and then the Jimmy Lake year, and then finally the Huskies make it to the national championship game for. I mean, this is like the pinnacle of post Don James Huskies football, and that moment is when you decide like the institution of college football is no longer appealing to me. And I will say this, I'm going to tell you mine, but I want to hear yours, but I want to tell you like, tell me if you relate to this. I'm not trying to minimize your experience to my experience. I have a hangover with Huskies football this year. I'm having a hard time investing myself into this season as much as last year because first off, it's like a whole new team essentially. I mean, there's a handful of players that are still there, but like essentially it's a whole new team. Obviously, new coaching staff, and it's just like I know they're not going to be as good, and it's just like sad to me that Kalen DeBoer isn't there. It's sad to me that I don't get to watch Michael Penix every Saturday, and it's like, so for me, I definitely understand having a hangover, but that's not what you're experiencing.
Yeah, no, and I think for what it's worth, like, it it wasn't until it wasn't until after the national championship. Like it wasn't like, oh, we lost the national championship.
So you got to enjoy the
Yeah,
college
I
football
enjoyed
playoff last year. Okay.
Yeah, last year was like I had to. I was only last year. I was only publishing once a week during the season instead of 2 or 3 times. But that wasn't because like I cared less. It was because
Sure.
like I wasn't making enough money. Like it
Right.
was because I have spent the last 8 years losing money every fall because I have to do so much. Had to do so much work for
Right.
that. And ignore actual work. No, I enjoyed that, but I think part of what you touched on is I think part of what you mentioned is very much related, which is that with you do have guys like Denzel Boston and Cameron like Fabiculana and stuff, and there is
Carson Bruner.
Yeah, Carson Bruner. Like there's plenty of guys who are still there, but it and this is, by the way, I do not want anyone to come away from this thinking, like, I want to make it very clear that player agency is a good thing. Players being able to get paid is a good thing.
Yeah.
So if anyone's listening to this and is like, yeah, NIL ruined, I'm like, NIL didn't ruin shit. I want to make that very clear.
Well, if it did, it ruined the thing that was broken. You know what I mean? Like, I do think
Sure,
it's
yeah. So what you could say is that because there's absolutely no regulation and there's so much money flowing into it from all these sorts of corners that are just absolutely corrupt, um, and the scale of resources that we're talking about here, um, uh, is essentially just because because there isn't anything real, because the NCAA spent the last decade just shoving their head in the sand and being like, no, 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 we want it to be this, instead of actually like being proactive. I mean, um, we now have something where even a good thing, which like players getting paid, like everything is just something to exploit. And uh and the effects of that is essentially like the Jerry Seinfeld line about like we're rooting for laundry is what we're rooting for.
sure.
That I always I like always enjoyed that joke as like a haha whatever, but it never really felt true. Like if you ever dissect that even for 3 seconds of thought, like it's obviously not true. Like the point of sports isn't being happy. The point of sports is being sad in a group. Like it's about.
That's a great point, actually.
I mean, that's not mine. That's from Twitter.
Yeah,
Um, it's in the Twitter sports Twitter Hall of Fame. But uh, and I think college football or college sports for as insane as it's been as it's been for as an institution for like 100+ years, and especially the last 40, um as like you could I think arguably say that it was like the 80s when early 80s when like the arms race really started to kind of build. um Even through all of that, like college football is or college sports in general, um is the place where that it was especially not true, um because of like what you mentioned was foreshadowing earlier, um because these were institutions that were baked into the history of the areas where they exist, because this was the place where this sport was invented. Explaining that to Europeans love to be like, oh my god, this is crazy, your college sports are like pros and these are students, oh my god. And I'm like, your athletes leave school at 15 and can't read better than an eighth grader. Like at least the colleges are the ones who invented the sport and it just kept living there. Like
right.
there's so many things worthy of criticizing college sports, but the one thing that was true this whole time is that it was like there was an identity of this is of being able to be like, oh, this is my tribe. And whether it's like this is literally the reason that I exist. Like I would not be born, my dad wouldn't be born if it weren't for them. And if they stopped existing in between when my dad was born and whatever and 1980 1977, then I wouldn't be born. Like it's so baked into that um and the investment that you have from that being not like, oh, here's some X's and O's, but like here's are your people and here's why they matter and here's what they're playing for, by the way. um it made it so that like you're rooting for laundry wasn't, it was like a funny little quip, but it's not ultimately true, obviously.
Right.
And um and I think the big thing is among like it's all these little bits um that it used, say 60 years ago, a lot of more teams could compete for the national title, and that's great. And that's fine. That's a world we never lived in. For you and I growing up, it was like, yeah, sure, there were fewer teams competing for the national title, and then whatever, and that didn't. But the thing is that didn't really matter. Like, yeah, everyone wants to win it, but for the other 115 teams who have no realistic shot at that, like there was still something that you're playing for. And yeah, it's really boring. It was really boring having Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State, and like one throwaway in every year. But
So, are you talking about like your period of frustration with that? It starts with like the college football playoff. Even you're not even like because pre college football playoff, it was probably even less. There was more chalk, or it was more chalky. Like it's just going to be the undefeated team in the best conference usually, as opposed to like actually having a tournament to decide who
oh
has
yeah,
a
the college
chance.
football playoff is complete. Like the modern one is like complete bullshit.
Well, which
It,
what is the modern? What do you
the
mean the
12,
modern one?
the 12
Oh,
team,
okay.
the four team. I was like, I thought did a good
It's
job.
interesting
I
to
was kind of take it or leave it because on one hand it diminished a lot of the stuff with like the Rose Bowl and blah blah blah, but like
so
I
hold
thought
on.
in some ways it was in some ways it was a better system than the number one versus number two because
Sure.
um
But that like there
because
was also a time, by the way, when that didn't even exist. Like the BCS
no, I
national
know,
championship
and you
game
can go
was
for BCS. Like, I think you could make a very compelling argument that the BCS was a better system than the 1-2 and having any national championship at all. But I was so young then.
yeah.
I don't really care. We adapt and we moved on. The point being, that's all kind of beside the point, though. The point is that, like, yeah, sure, okay, only a few teams were playing for it, but like, whatever, who cares? Even as you could see that concentration of resources becoming more just becoming more concentrated with a handful of like haves versus the have-nots. Even the have-nots still have something worth playing for, and they have. And it doesn't really matter what, like, it's different for every team, like
Can
and
can
then
I try to like summarize this briefly for my own because so when you told me you were not into college football this year, it made me interested because I feel like the NIL, while it's like changed the structure of college football, and it's like socialized football in a way that I think it's needed for, or college football in a way that I think
wait,
it's needed for a long time. Like it's made it so that
it's the
players can
opposite
actually
of that.
share in the money. No, because before they got nothing and now they get
Yeah, but
something.
this
Like
isn't socialized college football. This is just a bunch
nope.
of really like scummy collectives sending, like, trying to buy people, which is good,
No,
but
no, I
that's
know, but
not like what they should have is a revenue share.
before though it
There
was
should be a
none
revenue
of the
share.
money was shared with the players, and now it's some of the money. I'm not saying
Yeah,
it
but
is
that's not
socialized, but I'm saying
okay.
it's better than it was before.
Yeah,
It's
okay,
and
fair,
but
fair,
so
fair.
so and that's kind of my thing
And I
with
agree
like
with that.
what you keep bringing up is interesting to me because you're like it used to be this way, and then to me the BCS democratized college football in a way that it had never been democratized before, where we had an objective national championship. You may have hated the calculations that went into the
No, I didn't.
BCS, but no,
It's
no.
fine.
Let me finish what I'm saying though, because you didn't say it about the BCS because I think also maybe it's because I don't remember when the BCS championship started, but I barely remember when it didn't exist. I thought it was in the
90.
2000s, but
It might have been. I was gonna say 90, like 9. It might have been
let's see.
2000.
We have Google right here. But so let's see. What is the first year of the
Once you get to under this, though, I wasn't finished with like what I was
Yeah,
getting
yeah,
to.
no, no, I know. I'm just, I want to like summarize what you're saying. So, it started in '99. You're right. So, '99 that comes, and so then to me, the college football playoff, the 4-team playoff, democratizes it further, and to me, actually, the 12-team playoff democratizes it even further. It allows the like there's still like in a 4-team playoff, Boise State was never going to have a chance. And to me, the whole point of the playoff was and by the way, this is how you know they were never going to have a chance because Florida State didn't make it in last year. The
Yeah,
committee would not have allowed Boise State a undefeated Boise State team when you have like these traditional powers. But the reason like a Gonzaga can exist in the
oh my God,
NCAA
don't
tournaments
you
because
dare
there's
bring up the
68.
college basketball thing. Having 5 data points over a 60-minute thing, i.e., 5 players over a back and forth,
Hold on, no.
is so incomparable.
No. My point that I'm saying is
I know what
I'm
you're
not
saying.
saying Gonzaga can be a champion. The only reason they are allowed to be
I know what you're
in the tournament is because it's so big, right? And
saying.
now Boise State has a chance. Washington State has a chance. Like these teams, it's so much
No,
more
they don't.
democratized.
They have a chance to get in and get slaughtered. That
Yeah,
is
I mean,
not the same thing. That's the thing, is that this is what I was saying, is
say that's
that
a Butler. I guess I would say, you know,
sure, I mean, pick one. The resource imbalance is so big. And by the
sure,
way, when Alabama still gets in and doesn't make it to the top. People who are like, see, the 12-team playoff democratizes everything. Now Alabama's not in. That's not because of the 12-team playoff. That's because Kalen DeBoer is shitting the bed there. And so
I do want to talk to you about that, but we're running out of time a little bit from
no,
on my side. So,
but what a 12-team playoff, all it does is make the hyper focus for everybody on a national championship that still doesn't exist for them. And now they're not playing for anything that matters, that has mattered for the last 100 years, for the last whatever. We've broken up complete conferences, solely to make like TV execs more money, by the way.
Sure. I think that's a fair beef. I think like the disintegration of the Pac-12 is an obvious negative that I agree with you on.
Yeah, I mean, but it's all comes back to the same thing, which is destroying any sense of the identity and the tribes and the everything that it was all played for the last however long you want to talk about it. Like, of course, nothing has ever stayed the same with these structures, whether you're talking about conferences or rules or the NCAA. Like, the last 150 years of college football is one that's dynamic and constantly changing. So I think just being like, oh my God, things are new, that sucks, is like, I want to be clear, that's not what I'm doing. The combination of, okay, this is a bunch of guys who on this team who I have no connection to. They're not, transferring is great, but like, cool, whatever. Who are you? I don't care. The fact that they're all playing for this like fake little hologram of a possibility at a national title, which nobody has. Like the opportunity is no greater now than it was 5 years ago or whatever with a 14 playoff. You're just going to get into a thing that doesn't matter. Like, we've placed all this value on a playoff that has no value. If you want to put value on winning the national title, that's great, cool. But like, this doesn't actually like the way this doesn't increase. Like, if you're what it does increase is the likelihood that teams that do have these giant resource advantages, like Alabama, Texas, Ohio State, Oklahoma, whatever, can have a slightly down year where they do lose like 2 or maybe 3 games, but they still do have the talent advantage and the coaching advantage and the resource advantage, where they can still get hot at the end of the year. The committee can be like, okay, you get to go in on 2 games or on 2 losses, and they now, when they've hit hot at the end of it, because of their talent advantages and their coaching advantages, because they have bajillions more money than Wazoo or whatever, they just get to run through and slaughter everybody who in the past, or like slaughter the underdogs who get in because like, oh, this 12-team playoff has democratized it. Whereas in the past, if you are like, if you're a team that gets in over Alabama, you might you now just have to play these 2 games, and that is actually makes it an actually doable, achievable feat.
I guess to me it seems like you're like kind of fighting for people who aren't losing, right? Like the universities.
Yeah,
I think Boise State University's got to be thrilled. I suspect the players who play for Boise State, who, let's say they get it, whoever the team is, whoever the example is, maybe it's not Boise State, maybe it's Washington State, would rather have the opportunity to play in the college football playoff than not. I think the fans of Boise State would rather watch their team play in the college football playoff than not. So, like, you don't think so?
Boise State rather watch their team play 3 extra games that inevitably leads to them losing. I love Boise State, by the way. I've always loved them because obviously, the talent disadvantage is so high in
Wait, so finish that thought you were saying though. Would they rather see them play three games?
How many games? If you make it in as the 12 seed, it's 3, right?
Yeah, I think it's 3. So because there's the four teams get a bye. Yeah, I think no, maybe it's 4 extra games. Well, that's to get to the national championship game. I think the chances are they probably go in as a significant underdog and maybe play 1 extra game most times. Yes.
Ruining the 2007 Fiesta Bowl, which by my estimation is the greatest game of all time. Like, I think Texas USC doesn't have shit on the Boise State Oklahoma Fiesta Bowl. Um, that stands alone. Like that is what it is. And yeah, we don't have like bowls.
So
There is like no value or whatever. But
that
the
was
amount of
Texas
what we're
won
taking
that game,
away
or is
from
that was that a USC win? I'm like trying to remember in the
Texas USC. I
Yeah,
forget the one that everyone because they played three out of 4 years for the
right.
national title, and so everyone always I get them all confused.
So do you think Boise State fans would have viewed that season worse if they had gone on to play whichever of Texas or USC won and they lost that game? Like that Fiesta Bowl, that experience wouldn't have been as exciting if you paired it with losing eventually in the another game, if they played another game that season?
If you played another 2 or 3 games and you inevitably lose
But
during that,
in that circumstance, it's like them versus the national champion. But yeah,
but that's not what we're dealing with.
But
That's
okay,
why
so
I think the 14 playoff was a
fine.
pretty
So like
decent
let's say
move.
they go on to win 3 additional games and then lose. Do you think that's a worse season for Boise State fans than it is for them to win the Fiesta Bowl and not have any like national accomplishment or acclaim? And then also, by the way, like for the program's long-term history or long-term future, I think playing in these playoffs is probably really good. It's national TV exposure for their program. So like I'm skeptical of the thing you said about the Boise State fans not wanting to see their team play 3
I'm not
extra
speaking
games.
for any other fans.
Sure.
Like, to be clear, I don't
So
I'm not
would
speaking
you
for
have
anybody
rather
else.
seen the Huskies play in the old Rose Bowl last year and win the Rose Bowl than play in the college football playoff in the national championship game?
I
guess
no,
it's
the national championship game itself is like worthy of a loss.
Well, that's the 3
But that being
extra
said,
games that you're talking about, though, or that's like 3 or 4 extra games would mean they got to the national championship game.
but there has been pretty significant like the data on college football. Actually, Andrew Percival has some. I don't know if he's doing it so much as anymore, but he used to have a lot of good stuff essentially on the myth of college football parity, and that anything can happen on a Saturday, because anything can happen on a Saturday once, but
Sure.
you don't have by creating this web of like of all these 12 teams get in, and then
I agree with you that it doesn't significantly increase Boise State's chances. It takes them from 0 to 0.01 or something like that, right?
It takes them to 0 to 0.001, and then also at the which by itself I don't care about. That's good. Like if that was in a vacuum, I would support it.
And it's probably actually significantly more than 0.001, but it's like a minuscule amount. It's a minuscule amount.
No, it's not, because it lets in teams who are. It doesn't matter. We've already been over this. It takes it from 0 to 0.001, and then it ruins everything that isn't in that 12 teams. So the value for there in the past, there used to be value that like, oh, if you're, I don't know, Iowa State, I don't know, like there were still things you could accomplish that within the the ecosystem where your program lived, that mattered. Whether that's,
I think for us it's the Rose Bowl, right? Like what we're talking about for us is the Rose Bowl versus the national championship, right?
No,
like
no, it's not. It's the Rose Bowl's great, but I mean, I'm talking about like within. This is back to like the conferences and stuff. Like within the conferences, like you have like all this history and all these games that matter because they do. Like there's no necessarily external value to like. There's no external value to an Apple Cup win, but there is value because we make it that way. And the fact that we've scrapped everything so that some TV execs can get richer, so that 12 teams every year can have like this veneer of a possibility for a national championship, and said that effectively nothing else matters. Like and this is really what it is. I don't care that we play Rutgers. I don't care about playing Michigan State or Michigan. Like I don't, I was like, that was a nice win, but I don't really care. Like it's just, I
think I understand it a little bit better now, because I probably still disagree overall. Like
the playoff stuff itself is like whatever. I get that everyone has different opinions on that, although we will see
the conference realignment sucks and it kills the history of college football. And I think that we're just like My honest prediction, and this probably feeds into your point to some degree,
Mhm.
is that we're like not far off from there being like a 64 team super college league, and we like everybody else goes to essentially Division two, and
Or
we
Div 1
move
as
on from the college football model that we have.
I
And
think. Oh, go on.
yeah, and I mean I think that's like it's sad. It's probably a reality. It's like it's it hasn't hit basketball as quickly because basketball there's like 300 or something because there's just it's so much
Mhm.
cheaper to have a basketball team than it is to have a football team.
Yeah.
But I mean, we were like headed that way with basketball to a degree, and the only thing that's kind of kept the small programs alive, that's allowed Gonzaga to become a recruiting power. That's probably xed their athletic department budget by 10, 20, whatever, even relative to inflation, uh, is the fact that they have this chance. And they're a Cinderella story, like from the beginning, right? Like the fact that they became a powerhouse program and have maintained it without joining a major conference is unheard of. It's probably once in a lifetime, once in a millennium. It's a
Mhm.
once in a, I get that, like, but they couldn't have they could not have had that
Totally.
rise without 64 teams being allowed in the
The one
tournament.
thing, and I do the one will say the one positive, quote unquote, that I could maybe see from the 12-team playoff is over the course of like like 2 decades. If
Sure.
things are maintained for that long, they won't be. Spoiler. Um, that a team that is can build up some level of brand from that, but at the same
Yeah.
time that was that was able to be done previously anyway if you were at the top all the time but just were not quite sneaking in to the top five.
Yeah.
um and all but the other thing about basketball, like people when people bring up like basketball's 64 teams and they like you always get these Cinderella runs every year and it's magical, and I'm like, that's not even remotely comparable. Uh, because as far as the possibilities that exist within football and basketball, within basketball versus football, because basketball, like you said, it's much cheaper. You don't have to shell out, hundreds and hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, to have a competent program, and not just competent, but like top notch is
Sure.
a whole other deal. You only have 5 guys on the field on the court at once, so that's 6 different data points per team, where a talent superiority on one side does not come into play, and also, phone ring. But point being, that's how I know when I'm talking to somebody who's like extremely casual. Is when they're like, "But basketball is 64." The other thing is that yeah, the Cinderella runs are really great, but they also never get to the top. And so if you're wanting to like,
Do you think those
um,
programs, like,
huh?
do you think that, like I said, like Butler, do you think
Yeah.
Butler didn't benefit from going
No, I
that far?
think they all benefit. But the
Sure.
idea, I love the basketball model is fucking awesome. But it is fucking awesome for basketball, and using that as a model for football to try to give this illusion of like you can make it, but you're not going to, and actually this is going to diminish the purpose for everybody except for like still the handful of teams that have it all.
So like
Um
imagine Boise State, imagine there had been this 12-team
mhm.
playoff
In
since the
2007.
year 2000. Since the
Yeah.
year 2000. Do you not think that Boise State's like standing in college football would be the same or better at this point? Like the amount of
Yeah, that's a good
nationally
question.
televised game.
I think probably not, because
I think
a
that's sorry.
I
I'll let
think
you explain it before I say it's crazy, but I think it's crazy.
I think it could have gone either way, but I think probably not, because if you see two things: one, their national standing was pretty much at that elite level under Pete and Kellen Moore, and as far as a group of five team, like, because group of five isn't just like some vibe; it's also the resources that they have available to them.
Right.
Um, and I don't really think realistically you could have a group of five team, um, any higher national esteem than Boise State under Chris Peterson. The other thing is that if you look at the psychology, and this happens all the time, in college football, as far as like who can sustain it and who can't, is that whether the model is the 12-team playoff or BCS um, or 14 playoff or whatever, you see that very you see the mass psychology, and in recruiting psychology of teams that make it in and don't make it any further over and over and over again. Once that trend is established, there's very little room, like recruits and the powers that be in the recruiting ecosystem that influence them, i.e. talent, i.e. human resource, i.e. what makes you go, catch on to that quickly and in a way that tends to historically limit the ceiling of teams that.
I'd be interested to see that demonstrated, because I can't.
Well, you saw it over and over again with, like, Oklahoma was the perfect example, under the 4-team playoff of, like, oh, they're gonna, and then they don't. But versus on the other hand is the teams that.
So you're saying that you would see, like,
let me finish.
Okay.
You've interrupted me once already. The teams that maybe don't necessarily quite make it in, but show that trajectory that, like, oh, you just need to, they just need that little push. Historically, often elite recruits that do not choose, say, Alabama, like whichever teams are at the very top, Alabama, Clemson, whatever at the time, that is a huge motivational factor that was often very notably, like, significantly cited as, like, I want to be the guy that helps them get over the top. And when you're in but constantly failing versus when you're out and almost there, that's like a very different framing that affects that talent acquisition, because that talent acquisition, or that talent that you're trying to acquire, has a brain. And granted, I'm not saying that, like, definitively. You could be right. This isn't, the 12-team playoff is, like, a thing I don't like, but it's nothing compared to, like, the conference alignment. Like, I think we just kind of end up in that that topic.
Can I say this real quickly? If what you're saying about Oklahoma, like, if what you're saying is true, you would expect their recruiting classes to have gotten worse, right? That's that's what you're saying, is that their recruiting classes would have gotten worse. And I'm just saying, that's what I'm saying.
It's not that they never got worse, or that they got worse. It's just that they didn't get better. Like, they didn't level up in the same way that you saw the absolute top. Like, and I'm not talking about this year, last year. For what it's worth, also, thanks to Jimmy Lake, like, the Jimmy Lake era is what made me stop caring about recruiting. So
sure. Well, to be fair, like, recruiting to me is one of the most disgusting cottage industries that's cropped up around sports to me. Like, especially, by the way, no disparagement of the people that maybe write for UW Dog Pound. I don't know who's on the recruiting.
We aren't recruiting insiders.
Because it's like that specific job is disgusting to me.
Recruiting I completely agree.
Yeah.
There's a reason why, like Aaron would like interview some recruits and just be like, send them some things and come back. But, like, yeah, I agree. I think that, like, the recruiting insiders and their, like, little forum mafia. Yeah, I completely agree with that. For the record, like, that is never anything we've done or been interested in.
Nice. I got to go take my kids to the pumpkin patch. Okay. But
that's fair.
I appreciate it. I interrupted. I know I interrupted.
No, you're fine.
It's a conversation, but I appreciate you coming on. I understand it better. I'd love to have you on if you ever and I know you're a big Kraken fan. I suck so bad at understanding and watching hockey consistently. It's just, I think it's like I'm a boomer and I can't fucking grasp it fully. So maybe someday.
It's much more basic than football. I will say that is part of two things.
But I grew up watching football, so
will things. I think that, like, the focus of this accidentally ended up at the playoff, which I don't really care that much about. When the main thing, there's all these little, I hope that, like, the main conclusive thing about why I don't really care anymore is that between the unregulated collectives,
sure,
with NIL, like, just essentially just churning everything over every year, instead of doing, like, the NCAA having some level of competence and proactiveness and having revenue sharing, that combined with the conference realignment.
The conference thing has been tough. I'll give you that.
Those are the main things. And I think that simply the new playoff just plays into and feeds the issues that are currently happening, which are more, based on what I just mentioned. That's really what it is. They're players I don't know or care about, playing against teams I don't care about,
Yeah.
and destroying matchups and like this history that has existed since before the Ottoman Empire in the case of the Pac-12. Um, and like that's really primarily it. I'm like, this is just laundry,
Yeah.
and it helps that the
I
Kraken came
think the
around at the
Seinfeld
same
thing,
time,
the
and
Seinfeld thing is a
they
great, I
aren't. They're
think.
community based.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna end it, and you're gonna hear the
Yeah.
theme song. And thank you for coming on.
Go take your
Uh,
kid to a pumpkin patch.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for coming on, and I will talk to you. I'll probably message you about this because I'll want to argue some more, but off the air. So
We were like, for the record, like what you were saying, I'm like, as far as the possibilities for lower tier teams to like make it up over the next 2 decades, like I don't think that's impossible. It could very well happen.
well,
The
I'll
thing
tell you
is,
what I
I
think
don't think
makes it impossible.
the
Let me tell you what I think.
structure, wait, let me finish. The structure of what college football is probably not going to look the same in a decade. So you don't
Mhm.
really have the time because it's constantly changing and just at the arms race of money
Yeah.
for that to probably be a benefit.
Well, and I think the other thing that, and again, it's like a thing that I believe is a necessary good for college football, but the fact that all these guys can just transfer every year is going to make it impossible for Boise State. There's no disincentive. There's no incentive for a guy to stay at Boise State when he could go make $2.5 million at Alabama. And yeah,
And
I'm with you on that.
that's exactly a part of it. Like
Yeah.
it's just not sustainable for smaller programs.
Yeah.
Unless there are serious overhauls and like regulatory overhauls
Yeah.
that manage to yeah, I mean that's really, I hope you don't cut this part out because
No,
like
this is all. I'm not cut. By the way, even the part I said I was going to edit out, I have
you're not
zero
editing that.
appetite for editing. If they're going to have to get through the Edinburgh talk to get to
Yeah.
the Huskies talk. Too
Good.
goddamn bad.
Come to my shit. Just
I
kidding,
got
I'm
one
not
last
shit.
question for you that then I genuinely have to go. If you cared about college football still, and like Jed Fish takes the Florida job, and you have the opportunity because of the down season at Alabama to bring Kalen DeBoer back to Washington next year, would you do it?
Oh. See, this is great because now this is purely, I mean, it would be a hypothetical before, but now it's purely a hypothetical because there's no emotional investment here.
Yes.
Probably not. What I do want is his daughter who's on the UW softball team. Coach Tar, shout out. She's the best. I was also one of the feral children who ran around the UW softball program as a kid.
Nice.
But what I want is for her to like ball out and then become like the favorite, the like DeBoer to redeem the DeBoer name.
Hell yeah.
So that I still do care a bit about. I care about softball because Coach Tar is my girl.
All right.
But yeah.
Gabey Lucas, thank you. We're
Yeah.
gonna listen to the music again.
All right. See ya. I hope you're not late to the pumpkin patch.
I won't be. All right.